Salemswa somnyama kulabaluthuli waba njengekuvuma kwenqwala wimbuwingonyama emathole ezinyathi ayethe ngono phakathi khula mlisa khula nzanzane elive bakwesabe betiphelele betipha
SwaziMed, dependable, affordable healthcare cover. Introducing our new SwaziMed member app. We encourage our members to download and register on the SwaziMed member app and enjoy all the services at the tips of your hands. Members can view accounts, statements, benefits, and update their personal details and many more. To register, go to swazimed.com or download the SwaziMed member app on Play Store or Apple Store. Click on Login as a member, enter your SwaziMed membership number. Create and enter your password, then confirm password. Enter your cell phone number or email that is already registered with SwaziMed system. SwaziMed, dependable, affordable healthcare cover.
It has just gone 4 minutes after 8. Good evening and welcome to the news bulletin at 8, brought to you by Eswatini TV. My name is Sanboy Ngong alongside Zamanzi Manze. Thank you so much indeed for choosing to stay with us. We're coming to you live from our Hospital Hill studios in Babane. Let's take a look at our top stories at 8. His Majesty King Eswatini III has urged countries to renew their commitment to achieve the United Nations Development Goals despite the challenges posed by conflicts and tensions in the world. The Acting Minister of Education and Training, Harris Blunga, says the awarding of schools and pupils who excelled during external examinations contributes in improving results. And the Minister of Commerce, Industry and Trade, who was represented by the Minister for Economic Development and Planning, Dr. Tambo Kine, today relaunched the Luyengo OK Foods mini market. And now the news in detail. His Majesty King Eswatini III has urged countries to renew their commitment to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals despite challenges posed by conflicts and tensions in the world. His Majesty King Eswatini III was speaking at the 77th United Nations General Assembly high-level debate at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Ingosikati Magelanga Ngaza accompanied His Majesty King Eswatini III to the United Nations where he addressed the world.
His Majesty the King arrived at the United Nations headquarters accompanied by Inkosikati Magelanga Ngaza, who was in full support of His Majesty as he weighed in on global issues. The King directly addressed troubling events that are shaking the world to its core and posing a threat to global stability. From the onset, His Majesty voiced concerns about the COVID-19 pandemic and conflicts and tensions in the world, which he said have resulted in catastrophic consequences, while also proving to be a setback to the attainment of Sustainable Development Goals.
These problems are a setback to the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, which are ongoing given that COVID has had a negative impact, while the conflicts are also taking their own toll on these programs. During the pandemic, we witnessed the collapse of many economies, the shutdowns of industries, and the disruption of poverty alleviation projects that could not be implemented properly due to all the prevention measures, which meant there was no movement of people and goods. Nevertheless, now that COVID is subsiding, it is high time for all of us to once again renew our focus on the SDGs and implement them, as they will play a crucial role in helping our countries develop.
His Majesty said the support of financial institutions is vital as countries rebuild their economies.
We hope and urge our financial institutions to remain open and receiving countries that need support to revive their developmental programs, to welcome their request with sympathy to the plight of the challenges that they faced during the troubling COVID and HIV/AIDS challenges. We do appreciate that in recent days, we have seen the financial multilateral organizations become more welcoming towards countries in need of budget support.
The king says Eswatini is focused on developing reliable energy as it ramps up efforts to attract investors.
As the Kingdom of Eswatini, we are continuing with our efforts to attract investment and to support small, medium enterprises, as well as create big industries, In doing so, we realize the need for reliable energy to help us achieve our investment goals. So it is one of the areas we are working on developing as a region. We are also focused on remaining highly competitive, which is why the World Bank Ease of Doing Business ranks us at the top in Africa when it comes to trading across borders.
His Majesty said food security, ending hunger and agriculture growth remain a priority for government.
We have increased budget allocations, engaged in emergency food aid distribution, providing cash transfers to the elderly and vulnerable school feeding programs, and other support services for disadvantaged populations. With regard to agriculture growth and development, the key projects driven by this public investment include the acceleration of water harvesting and irrigation development, where an average of 1,000 hectares is developed with irrigation every year.
The king joined other African leaders who called on the United Nations to grant the continent a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council.
Eswatini is of the ardent belief that Africa must have a permanent representation in the United Nations Security Council, a call made in Eswatini consensus in 2005. Our position emanates from the fact that every democracy has its exceptionality, and that societies are founded according to different cultural norms and values. We will not tire of the consideration and belated adoption of this call by the UN to bring in the proper perspective on the African polity.
His Majesty called on the United Nations to make necessary arrangements for Taiwan to participate in relevant United Nations specialized agencies, and said unity and respect among member states should drive all the outcomes of this year's General Assembly. In New York City, I am Sandile Makanya for Eswatini TV News.
The Russian invasion of Ukraine was a major talking point at the 77th United Nations General Assembly. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, rallied allies of the United States to isolate and punish Russia for its aggression on Ukraine.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, my fellow leaders,
Tensions between the United States and Russia over the war in Ukraine were tangible as world leaders gathered to address global issues. Tensions between the United States and Russia over the war in Ukraine were tangible as world leaders gathered to address global issues. President Joe Biden declared Russia's invasion of Ukraine a brutal, needless war. His remarks came a few hours after President Vladimir Putin announced an expansion of his war effort and threatened to use all means at his disposal, with the possibility of nuclear weapons, if Russia's territorial integrity is jeopardized. President Joe Biden rallied countries to isolate and punish Russia.
like you, the United States wants this war to end on just terms, on terms we all signed up for, that you cannot seize a nation's territory by force, that The only country standing in the way of that is Russia. So we, each of us in this body, who's determined to uphold the principles and beliefs we pledge to defend as members of the United Nations, must be clear, firm, and unwavering in our resolve. Ukraine has the same rights that belong to every sovereign nation. We will stand in solidarity with Ukraine. We will stand in solidarity against Russia's aggression, period.
After His Majesty the King had addressed the world, the President of Ukraine addressed the assembly virtually despite Russia's objection. He declared that Russia had committed a crime for which Ukraine demanded justice.
A crime has been committed against Ukraine, and we demand just punishment. The crime was committed against our state borders. The crime was committed against the lives of our people. The crime was committed against the dignity of our women and men. The crime was committed against the values that make you and me a community of the United Nations. And Ukraine demands punishment for trying to steal our territory.
Countries like Paraguay, Guatemala, and the Marshall Islands echoed His Majesty's calls for Taiwan's participation in the United Nations. On the news, I'm Sandile Makanya, reporting from the United Nations in New York.
Coming back home, the Minister of Commerce, Industry and Trade, who was represented by the Minister for Economic Planning and Development, Dr. Tambo Gina, today relaunched the Luyengo OK Foods mini market. Gina says it delights government to see such investments which seeks to resuscitate the economy of the kingdom.
The Luyengo OK Foods Minimark is one of 8 OK stores that suffered major damages during last year's civil unrest. An estimated cost to the tune of 67 million emalangeni was suffered by OK Foods franchise countrywide. Dr. Tambo Gina, who was representing the Commerce, Industry and Trade Minister at the relaunch of the Luyengo OK Foods Minimark, says government, through the Reconstruction Fund, has been able to assist the business to rebuild and be back to business.
Today we are here to open and relaunch our newest store, which is OK Minimark Luyengo. As seen with our previously relaunched stores, after the unrest of 2021, the business is coming back bigger, better, and stronger than before. The Luyengo store was previously about 200 square meters with only 10 employees. Now it is 650 square meters with 39 employees.
Lincoln Motza, who is the director for Linak Investments, which trades under OK Foods, thanked His Majesty King Eswatini III, who launched the Reconstruction Fund as an intervention aimed at supporting all those that incurred damages and losses during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the civil unrest.
And thank His Majesty the King Eswatini III for showing great wisdom through the Reconstruction Fund initiative after the unrest. The King's speech gave us hope that there was light at the end of the tunnel, and it sparked us into action to knock on doors and seek financial assistance from relevant financial institutions.
Dr. Tambo Gina says it is not only OK Foods that was affected, but their suppliers also suffered through a decline in the volumes of orders, which forced them to lay off and retrench staff. Gina says the commerce industry as a whole suffered major stock shortages due to the unrest, as many manufacturers lost their businesses and could not produce enough to sustain the demand. Fiso Ngumalo for Eswatini TV News, Malkans.
The Acting Minister of Education and Training, Harris Blunga, says the awarding of schools and pupils who excelled during external examinations contributes in improving results going forward. The minister said this during the Manzini Region Academic Awards 2022, where schools and pupils who excelled in last year's external examinations were awarded.
There were 4 categories in the Manzini Region Academic Awards, which are Outstanding Individual Student, 100% pass rate in schools, Most Improved Schools, as well as Outstanding Schools with many merits. Former Minister of Education and Training, Phineas Makakula, encourages head teachers to uphold good behavior and leadership. The Minister of Education and Training, Lady Howard, was represented by the Minister of Youth Affairs, Harris Bulunga, who applauds schools for producing good results despite many challenges last year.
The Minister of Education and Training is aware that a lot of gaps still exist amongst educators and learners in terms of inclusion. Despite the existing policies that are intended to counter all barriers that may exist due to social background, geographical location, and the digital divide. The Minister of Education and Training has further observed that learners from better socio-economic backgrounds and those attending private schools had better learning advantages than those from poor socio-economic class. This was due to limited internet connectivity, the lack of resources such as computers and tablets, and limited radio and television coverage. In the not-so-distant future, the ministry aims to improve on this.
Manzini Regional Education Officer Sizwe Gnene hopes the Manzini Region Academic Awards will inspire more schools and pupils to excel.
Other children out there are going to be inspired to say, maybe we can also have such an opportunity of being recognized, of being appreciated regionally, where everybody says, congratulations, well done. It is going to be an inspiration to others who may not have actually gotten the opportunity to be part of this gathering, but when they see that we're recognizing those children who have done well, they are honestly going to be inspired to also wish that one day they also are part of such a big gathering that we're having today.
Manzini Region Academic Awards Vice Chairperson Tax Team, Lindy Wenkambule, talks about the move to make them national.
It is going to go a milestone when students are recognized nationally, students recognized regionally, students recognized at constituency level. They are going to be motivated.
The Minister of Education and Training Under Secretary of Schools Manager Jonathan Hlengetwa, most cases reported in his office are sexual harassment and relationships among teachers and pupils. He condemns such behavior. For Eswatini TV News, Fortune Dlangamandla, with Smova Shong and Babane.
Let's take a look at our financial indicators and see how markets performed today in our financial report.
Standard Bank. It can be.
Welcome back. You're still with the news bulletin at 8 at Eswatini TV, and now for our sports news. Botswana national under-23 head coach Kaelo says getting maximum points in their first leg of the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers against Eswatini will put them in the driver's seat going into the second leg to be played in Botswana next week. Kaelo was speaking during the team's training session at Somhlolo National Stadium ahead of the game tomorrow.
We're here at Somhlolo National Stadium, where behind me it's the young zebras, as they call them, the under-23 national team for Botswana. They are here for the qualifiers of the 2023 AFCON qualifier game against Eswatini tomorrow on Friday. This is their chance to train here at Somhlolo National Stadium to get a feel of the pitch, having previously on Wednesday, witnessed, of course, the young Siflang also getting a chance to train here at Somhlolo National Stadium. Now, the team, as we can see behind me, they're in a quite beautiful mood and entertaining mood. Their head coach believes there are quite some similarities to the Kingdom of Eswatini. One similarity is that when I asked him, that he responded to me, is that knowing that our local league hasn't started, so our players are likely not to be fit, he believes the same also applies to them. Their players have not been quite active in terms of league fitness. So he believes both sides have some similarities.
The players have been involved in pre-season games, and obviously in terms of fitness they are found to be at different levels. So, but we are coaches, so that therefore we need to deliver on this assignment. We can't complain about that, because if we complain, we are going to waste a lot of time not focusing on the game itself.
We also got a chance to speak to team captain Teboho, who mentioned that they are aware of how football is played here in the Kingdom of Eswatini. So it should be a good game come Friday here live at Somploro National Stadium.
Yeah, we've been preparing very well for the Eswatini game. We came here to fight. I think we'll do very well in tomorrow's game.
The kickoff will be at 3 p.m. local time on Friday here at Somploro National Stadium. The winner between the two sides, remember, will face Egypt, but that is prior to the second round of this game that will be played in Francistown next week. For Eswatini TV Sports, Fabrice Musonera with Muslim Konda, Somploro National Stadium, Lobam.
Eswatini Olympics and Commonwealth Games Association's Chief Executive Officer Maxwell Chele says the association did formulate a policy that seeks to govern how to reward athletes who represented the kingdom well, especially during tournaments under Olympic and Commonwealth.
Eswatini Olympics and Commonwealth Games Association say preparations for the 2024 Olympic Games have already started. The association say that athletes look geared to represent the country, as they are aware of different rewards that await them if they are to represent the country well internationally. The association says recently the region has been quite impressed by the performance that is being displayed by local athletes. Chief Executive Officer of the Eswatini Olympic Commonwealth Games Association, Maxwell Chele, says the mandate is quite clear on how athletes are rewarded when coming from international competitions.
Our focus really as a WOGA is limited to the All Africa Games, the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics. So those are the three major multi-sport international competitions that we recognize in terms of incentives. I'm sure you will recall that last year we had the Tokyo Olympics, whereby one of our athletes, Sbusiso Matsenjwa, he qualified for an incentive that was paid out to him, together with the recently held Commonwealth Games, where he got an incentive of 20,000 emalangeni. Now, what happens at regional level is that's where Sports Council also then kicks in and does incentives at regional level. We are looking at a situation right now where we're actually preparing for the Region 5 Games in Malawi, which are the youth games. Certainly, even there, I'm quite sure that the policy within the Sports Council is really going to kick in when it comes to podium finishes.
At the Olympics, the country is yet to register a medal since first appearance back in 1972. With the Commonwealth Games, the history is quite positive, as 4 medals have been brought in before, with 3 from boxing and 1 from athletics. The first ever medal for the country in Commonwealth Games was a bronze medal from athletics. The first ever medal for the country was a bronze during the Commonwealth Games back in 1974 that was won by Richard Mabuza, who was an athlete. For Eswatini TV Sports, Fabrice Musonera, Mbabane.
With those sports news, we've hit the home stretch of the news bulletin at 8 at Eswatini TV. Before we go, here's a quick reminder of our news-making headlines tonight. His Majesty King Eswatini III has urged countries to renew their commitment to achieve the United Nations Development Goals despite the challenges posed by conflicts and tensions in the world. The Acting Minister of Education and Training, Harris Blunga, says the awarding of schools and pupils who excelled during external examinations contributes in improving results. And the Minister of Commerce, Industry and Trade, who was represented by the Minister for Economic Development and Planning, Dr. Tambo Kine, today relaunched the Luyengo OK Foods mini market. With that, we have come to the conclusion of the news bulletin at 8 at Eswatini TV. We shall now cross over to the Weather Center for a detailed weather report from us and the rest of the team here at Eswatini TV. For now, it's good night and God bless.